Good afternoon from a grey, miserable, damp Grand Union Canal. I'm just outside Leamington, Royal Leamington Spa at the minute. I'm going to be heading to Warwick over the next few days. I actually put a few Q&As up on Instagram, I think last week, and I was surprised how many of you have been enjoying the baking video. So I thought on a crap day like today, I'll just stay put and film baking and hopefully maybe teach you some ways of how not to do it. I'm going to be doing a just basic white loaf, which I just use for sandwiches, toasts, anything. Maybe get onto sourdough a bit later on, and then maybe something sweet. And beer of the week, you'll be pleased to hear. I'll just finish this and then we'll get baking. Sorry about the lighting in here, it's gone really dark and I'm just trying to brighten up with this little light, but it's a bit glary, so please bear with me. Right, so for a white loaf, I'll measure all the ingredients out. Basically just going to be flour, water, yeast and salt. Simple. It sounds simple, but each of these have got so many variants, that's when it gets complicated. I'm going to try my best not to confuse everyone and confuse myself, which is quite likely. Right, I'll start with the flour and I'll try and keep this as uncomplicated as possible. I've just got extra strong bread flour in the cupboard at the minute. That just means it's got higher protein content. I won't get into that, but strong bread flour is fine. Use 500 grams of that, 350 grams of water. Now that can get complicated with temperature. Basically you don't want to have too hot or too cold, you just want to feel it. And on Richard Burton's class that I did, he said it sounds funny, but just wet water, like if you put your fingers in it, you don't really want to feel the temperature, if that makes sense. So like basically room temperature, I guess would be an easy way, but not too cold, not too hot, because the yeast will react differently to different temperatures. Yeast wise, people are obsessed with sourdough at the minute, or have been for a while. It's been a bit of a phase. Everyone seems scared of using normal yeast. This is a good quality French baker's yeast, or fresh yeast, but I've actually frozen it because it keeps well. And yeah, it's just way better than the powdered stuff you can get. So if you go to a local bakery, or even Tesco's, you can ask them for their yeast. At the bakery, sometimes they'll let you have it. I don't know if they still do. But this is essentially what they'll be using in French bakeries for baguettes and stuff. Now that is a 42 gram block and that will make 4 loaves. So I'm going to quarter this. Ideally you'd quarter it before you freeze it because it's easier, but I'll just cut it in quarters now. And then salt, just good quality sea salt. This is from Portugal. 500 grams of flour, 350 water, roughly 10 grams of fresh yeast and 10 grams of salt. So I'm going to start off with just the yeast, flour and water, and add the salt later, just so the yeast gets a chance, because the salt will actually inhibit the yeast a bit. It's just on low to start with. So it's been about 10 minutes, I'm just going to add the salt. That'll do for now, because beer of the week. Right, beer of the week. I've gone to Germany since it's basically Oktoberfest. I think it is Oktoberfest. This is Hofbrau Original from Munich, which is where Oktoberfest is from, so it felt right. Is it a Hales or is it a Hales? Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have room for a Stein on the boat. So we will go with a pint glass. It's just good, isn't it? Picked this up in Morrison's. I don't know if it's because of Oktoberfest. Sometimes they stock Paulaner, which is from Berlin, I think. They keep a few German beers normally, but I don't often see Hofbrau. It's nice. Favourite tool for baking, little dough scraper, so handy. See, the gluten's activated. Now the important thing is not to add any more flour at this stage, because then that changes the recipe and you end up baking a brick rather than a loaf of bread if you add too much. So dough scraper acts as flour, like to stop it sticking. I'll show you what I mean. One sticky mess. Proper sticky mess. But with dough scraper, just basically going to try and create a ball that's got a top. I'll show you what I mean. Basically just tuck in the bottom in. You should get a nice smooth top in a minute. Just done it quickly. Basically take the dough for a walk, tucking in the bottom edges, and then this top will remain the top right the way through to when you bake the bread. This is the bit that will rise. So no flour added, and this is going to go back in the bowl until it's doubled in size. I'll put it by the fire nice and warm, like that. Cover it with a bag. Could take about 45 minutes to an hour, depending how active the yeast is and everything. Right, a couple of hours later, took a bit longer than expected. It's doubled in size. Got a bit of a wiggle. I'm going to put some flour on the top, just to help release it. Don't really want any flour per se on the worktop. And also need to, I'm going to make a loaf, so I'm going to grease a loaf tin. Use the scraper just to free the sides of that off gently, and then dough. And I don't want to take too much of the air out of this. Just want to kind of fold it in, fold it in, fold it in, fold it in, and that's the top of your loaf. Like that, and then let that brew for another 45-ish until it's kind of filled out a bit. You see it's got quite a bit of. Next up, I'm going to start the sourdough ready for tomorrow. So that is same again with the flour, 500 grams. But I'm going to do a mix of white and something different. Mainly white. Probably go 400 grams of white flour. 400 grams of white, 100 grams of dark rye, just to give it a nice bit of texture. So 500 grams of flour total as before. 350 grams of water as before. And then instead of yeast, I'm going to add 200 grams of my sourdough starter. Can you see the texture? And then to keep the sourdough starter going, you basically feed it. So because I've taken 200 grams of starter away, I'm going to put back probably 140 grams of flour and 60 grams of water. and then this will be good for a week in the fridge until you want to bake again with it. I'll start that off on the mixer first, and then I'll feed the starter. And then 10 grams of salt goes in after, as before. And same again with this, just going to turn it into a ball with a top. It's a bit stickier because it's got quite a bit of rye flour in it, which is a bit harder to work with. Then I'm going to put this in a glass bowl instead so we can see what's happening as it proves. And then with this, we'll have to gently fold it up to create a bit more tension as it goes, but I'll explain that in a minute. But leave that for about 45 to an hour, covered. Whoa. A little bit too much dough for the tin really, but then I'm just going to score the top to try and, basically as it rises, just to set a point that it rises from rather than splitting out the sides. It normally splits out the sides anyway when I bake it, but. And then in the oven, as high as it will go. But I've preheated the oven. You should do that first. Put timer on for about 15 minutes and then I'll check it. Probably take about 25 minutes in total. Then I'm just going to put this back in outside of the tin to cook the bottom and the sides a bit better. Now the hardest part is to not cut it before it's cooled down. I know it's tempting, but it's part of the process of something. I don't really understand it, but the bread's kind of still cooking. But the sourdough, see a few bubbles going on. So just put a little bit of flour. And then just kind of lift, easier said than done, kind of lift the base and fold it in on itself. A few times like that. Do that a couple more times, which I probably won't film because it's getting a bit late now. And then I'll put this into the proving basket in the fridge overnight. So I'll catch up with you in the morning. Good morning. Just taking the sourdough out of the fridge. It's been in there overnight. The oven's on, preheating, full temperature, hot as it'll go. Almost ready to put this in the oven. It's always scary as to whether this is stuck or not to the bowl, but score, straight in the oven. I'll pop a timer on for about 15 minutes so I can check it. It normally takes about 20-25 minutes overall. Now I'm going to make some toast for breakfast with the normal white loaf from yesterday. just about time for lunch. Sourdough's cooled down. Let's see what the inside's like. Not too bad. Wouldn't mind some larger holes all through, but that's not too bad for me. So you're probably thinking this is quite a bit of bread that I've got, and it is really. What I'm going to do is slice it and then freeze it, and then I can literally, when I want toast, I can just pull it out of the freezer and put it straight under the grill. I'm going to have a nice tin of fish for this. This is Sea Sisters Cornish hake with seaweed. I think they're the only fish cannery in England. Succulent white fish preserved in butter, dulse seaweed and lemon. Best served warm. Place the unopened can into boiled water for 3 minutes. Open and enjoy on sourdough toast. I will, don't you worry about that. Wow. Very good. That's a really good tin of fish. Sea Sisters. They sell out quite a bit. These ones at the minute are still available. The Cornish hake seaweed, really nice.